Hey guys, what's up? It's Andy Brew here, and today we're going to talk about the latest Vengeance Stimulator changes on the new PTR build. Okay, let's get right into it. So, Immolation Aura. Immolation Aura previously was a 30-second cooldown PTR, which is obviously a bug because it's meant to be a 15-second cooldown that's then decreased by haste. So currently on live, for example, my Vengeance DH with its current haste has 11-second Immolation Aura. And it's essentially meant to be like that on PTR, but for whatever reason it wasn't working as intended. Basically, this was kind of a catastrophic bug in that bugs like these make it impossible to really limit test a tank when it's missing such an important button being up more often than it was. Especially the case with Immolation Aura, because this is a spell that not only gives you a ridiculous amount of Fury gen, but it also gives you a lot of souls, which then, drastically increases both your damage and survivability in many different ways. So it's very nice that Blizzard has fixed this. It'll be good to see if they have fixed some of the other bugs as well. So going on from that, they buffed Shear and they buffed Soul Cleave. So right now, Vengeance Demon Hunter has the lowest single target out of any tank on PTR. Obviously there are a lot of bugs, as we talked about just now, that hinder them. But essentially what is meant to be calculated damage that it should have if everything is fixed on single target is still going to be ridiculously low compared to some of the other tanks. These buffs are basically a step towards the right direction. They're definitely not enough, I would say, but it's good that Blizzard at least realizes that a single target should be buffed for Vengeance Demon Hunter. And perhaps with maybe a couple of other changes in the future, this will bring them more in line with some of the other tanks. So we can talk about Glaive now, I guess. So they've made it possible to play a lot of the Glaive talents now with a lot of the changes to the main tree, and they've also buffed Glaive damage. So a problem Vengeance Demon Hunter was having, which any Vengeance Demon Hunter can probably tell you, is that they really struggle with ranged threats until they actually start spirit bombing and stuff is in melee where they can really, they have Immolation Aura ticking. They can actually, put globals into mobs and actually hit them. They really struggle with ranged threat. And this is going to be even more so when, with this new build, you don't really want to pull with Sigil of Flame. Sigil of Flame is basically not only a massive offensive cooldown, but also a massive defensive cooldown. And it's not something that you really want to throw around in order to pick up mobs from ranged. So them basically making it so that you can get double Glaive and also be able to get the Glaive bounce talent more easily without dropping anything too harsh that you also want to have out of the talents on the main tree is a really, really good step in the right direction. Like, this basically means that lots of times you're going to pull with double Glaive, and yeah, I think it's a very, very good change. It's going to basically be huge quality of life for Vengeance Demon Hunter, especially when they're pulling from ranged and dealing with bringing packs together. So going on from that, we have Ascending Flame. So Ascending Flame previously was down here where Fel Flame Fortification is. Previously Meteoric Strikes was where Ascending Flame is, and then Fel Flame Fortification was where Meteoric Strikes is. So what they've tried to do is make it more accessible for you to play Ascending Flame. I personally think Ascending Flame is not that good though, for multiple reasons. Number one, the initial damage increase of Sigil of Flame is not that big, when what is the big damage part of it is actually the damage over time effect, the dot, and the initial damage is something that is very low. This buffing the initial damage by 50% is definitely only a very small DPS increase. It might still be a talent that you end up playing, I'm not 100% sure, but the multiple applications of Sigil of Flame part of the talent is completely useless. The number one reason why this is completely useless is because you will never ever ever send both your Sigil of Flames off straight away. It's never something that you will do, both for damage and also survivability reasons. Damage reason is that with double application, you don't get double the amount of soul generation. And the other reason as well is that you're not going to gain as much value with the increased parry chance from Illuminated Sigils because you're not spacing them out as much. So yeah, it's a huge damage loss, huge survivability loss to ever send double of Sigil of Flame. So yeah, basically this talent is useless in my opinion. So Aura Pain got moved around, same with Charred Warblades. We'll talk about this. These are like part of a group effort to move around talents, which ends up opening things like some of the throw glaive talents. We can talk about that in a second. So bulk extraction got buffed. It's a 1 minute cooldown instead of 1.5 minutes. We can briefly talk about this. The thing is, it's a nice buff, but I think bulk extraction, what it really needs is to be moved somewhere else in the tree for you to play it as a Vengeance Demon Hunter. You can see bulk extraction is here, and you have to commit 3 talent points into some very bad talent points, as we pointed out already. Ascending Flame, in my opinion, is basically useless, aside from the initial damage is like kind of okay, but not really in comparison to some other talents. And then Meteoric Strikes does absolutely nothing for you. There's no talent currently where you get something like whenever you Infernal Strike, you pop a Sigil of Flame down. There's no talents like that, so having basically a reduced cooldown of Infernal Strike is basically useless for a large portion, especially when you already have 2 charges and they're already very low cooldowns as it is. Meteoric Strikes is basically a useless talent, and then you can get bulk extraction. It feels very gimmicky, I would say. I'm not the biggest fan of this placement of bulk extraction, and I do hope that Blizzard maybe changes that in some coming builds. We'll have to see. Going on from that, we get to talk about concentrated sigils. So this is kind of interesting. I'm not really sure why they did this. I'll basically explain. So previously, both concentrated and precise sigils are 2 things, where concentrated sigils is where all the sigils are placed at your location, and precise sigils is where all sigils are based at your target's location. Now, this has always been a very gimmicky talent in that the vast majority of people just use macros for their sigils. I mean, I myself, I use @cursor macros, and I also have some @self macros as well. So both concentrated sigils and precise sigils have always felt like very gimmicky talents, in that you don't have as much freedom in placing sigils how you want to, but also that the talents themselves, in terms of what they do, is completely useless to someone that just has very normal macro, and the vast majority of Vengeance Demon Hunter players do. So the only reason you would play this talent was for the increased duration of sigil effects by 2 seconds. Especially with the new build and how Sigil of Flame works in tandem with everything else, this talent was basically massive. So previously this talent didn't work properly on PTR, in that if you played concentrated sigils, you wouldn't get the increased sigil from Illuminated Sigils. They didn't work properly, something to do with the IDs, I'm not entirely sure, but previously it was a bug. So right now on PTR you wouldn't play this talent because you couldn't. But now they've made this talent, in my opinion, completely useless, in terms of you're only playing it for this sigil effect, but then no one in their right mind would ever use this talent. So yeah, I myself don't really know what Blizzard is doing here. I definitely think it's very strange. I would much rather just have a talent in its place that just increases the duration of sigil effects, because I do think this is a very big nerf to Vengeance DH, in that this talent doesn't exist, since it would have been a talent that you would have played, and it would have been a huge buff. Like, you would have got, for example, a 10-second Sigil of Silence, you would have got 10-second Sigil of Flame duration. So yeah, I do think that this talent doesn't exist. I don't know, it's definitely a weird decision. They buffed Feast of Souls massively, based off when I played Feast of Souls last as like a kind of testing. I don't think this change is big at all. Like, even though it got buffed by, well, it got doubled in its value, I still don't think this is that good. But maybe I have to like play it at least once or twice and kind of like see how strong it is. But yeah, personally, I don't really see it. So Fel Flame Fortification got buffed to 12% instead of 10%, but then it got moved to a very, I mean, as we talked about before, it got moved to a very difficult place to get it now, which yeah, I don't really like this decision. I would have much rather they put Fel Flame Fortification up here next to Ascending Flame, or perhaps even replaced it with Revel in Pain, since now that we don't play a Fiery Brand focused build, the value of Revel in Pain has gone down quite significantly. I'm a bit surprised that they didn't kind of move this somewhere else to be more accessible. since I think a talent like this, especially with the fact that we now have a really strong Agonizing Flames, our uptime of Fiery Brand is going to be very, very high compared to what it was last patch. So yeah, it's definitely a weird decision. I'm definitely not a fan of that. It would be a big pseudo buff to Vengeance DH for this talent to be moved elsewhere. We'll have to see what they do. And then the other thing is, so they buffed Fiery Demise, which is also weird in a way. I mean, they buffed it as a way of, you know, hey, if you do damage in your Fiery Brand window, you are going to do more than what you would normally. Fiery Demise is definitely a talent though. That's also going to be kind of tricky. I mean, I suppose if you didn't want to play Chains of Anger, actually, I don't know. I think you always want to play Chains of Anger, to be honest with you. It's just going to be so much synergy with the tier set. I don't ever see you really kind of like skipping it and going somewhere else. I don't know. I think it's going to be really tricky to not put points in Revel of Pain, especially like when I think about this build as a more M+ high key build. You're always going to get Chains of Anger. So yeah, I don't know. Fiery Demise is definitely a talent that I think is going to be quite difficult to play, and it also just has way lower value than what it has on live right now. Since you don't have Recrimination, you know, you don't have the old tier piece set, it's definitely going to be rather troubling. So okay, they buffed Focused Cleave, which I think is very nice if you're going to end up playing a kind of like Soul Crush focused build. It's definitely going to be very nice for raiding, I would say. Doesn't really do much for M+, because I don't think you'll ever go down that wing, but perhaps I am wrong. That remains to be seen. They also buffed Fracture, which kind of like goes in tandem with the Shear buff. They're just basically focused on buffing your single target more. And then they also buffed Illuminated Sigils. So previously, Illuminated Sigils gave you 20% increased chance to parry, and now it gives you 30. I have briefly checked on PTR though, and it seems that I don't think this increased parry chance is working correctly. So yeah, it's meant to be 30% chance, but based off, at least on dummies, it seems that you're only actually getting 20%. Perhaps it's different with real mobs, and obviously logs will show that, but I'm not entirely sure if this is implemented on PTR yet. Doesn't really look like it. So yeah, Infernal Armor got like kind of like moved to a different spot. Infernal Armor in a way got a pseudo buff this patch, in that you have higher uptime of Immolation Aura. Shear generates a little bit extra fury. I think that's if you ever really like kind of like play a build where, you know, you have like more choice between Fracture and you could play Shear Fury now, but I don't see you ever not playing Fracture. I don't know, like, I mean, you're always going to go for having more souls over something that gives you a tiny bit of extra fury. I'm not really sure what the reasoning behind that is. Essentially with the Glaive things, so you're able to get Champion of the Glaive or Master of the Glaive very easy now compared to before. And then on top of that, you can kind of get Bouncing Glaives very easily now as well. I think both these things are going to be very, very useful for Vengeance Simulator, just in terms of what we talked about. Having 2 charges of Glaive is going to make your life so much easier inside a Mythic Plus in terms of getting threat on range mobs, and also because you don't really want to use your Sigil of Flames randomly, as we talked about before. Like, Sigil of Flame is both a humongous DPS increase, but it's also a humongous survivability increase as well. Like, everything is based around this, so you're never going to really want to send them out randomly, you know, to pick up mobs. It's always going to be something that you want to kind of like pop when you can at least hit, I would say, 80 to 90+% of the pack. Definitely a really nice quality of life change. So Unrestrained Fury as well is also in a much better spot. So it's like easier to play than before. You could also play Vengeful Bonds as well. You have all sorts of like decisions really. I definitely think they've created more options with how they've designed the new main tree. But yeah, I definitely think with the spec tree, there's a lot left to be desired. I'm not happy with basically being forced to take Revel in Pain when we're not doing a Fiery Brand build anymore. And I'm not happy with Fel Flame Fortification being where it is. I hope these things are addressed in a later PTR build. We'll have to really see, I guess, what happens. Anyway, this is kind of like my initial thoughts based off the new PTR build. Obviously, I'm going to play some more Vengeance Simulator when I can. and basically give, I guess, more updated thoughts on my stream then. But yeah, all in all, I think it's nice, the changes that they've done. At least the blatant bug fix to Immolation Aura is nice that they fixed that. Would have been very frustrating to keep playing with how it was before. I just hope that they kind of really think about some of the things that I've mentioned, maybe clarify things like Illuminated Sigils a bit more. But yeah, that's essentially my thoughts on the Vengeance DH changes. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you later. Bye.